Today's video is sponsored by Rockform. I'll tell you a little bit more about them later on in the show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Yammy Noob, and today we are out here courtesy of Harley-Davidson at the Indy Motorsports Ranch here in Arizona, checking out the brand new Road Glide and Street Glide ST models. For those of you who saw my Further Faster event coverage, you might have thought that I wasn't too pleased when I saw these motorcycles. I thought it was just a new year of bold new graphics, and they brought me out to see exactly what it was all about. So we are going to be checking out these two motorcycles out on the road and really answering some questions about whether or not this is a true new upgrade or whether or not it's just throwing some farkles at an already good motorcycle. Let's dive in. So I want to try and keep this section short and sweet so we can get out on the road nice and quick, but there are some updates to these motorcycles that I wanted to talk about before we got moving. The first thing is the big upgrade from the 114 to 117 cubic inch engine in here, which is going to increase the rear wheel torque to about 127 foot-pounds and about 106 horsepower. Now the big question is, how does that hit the road? Because for those of you who have seen my coverage of other motorcycles in the Softail line, you know that I enjoy the torque, but I'd kind of like to feel a little bit more, and these are big motorcycles. The Road Glide here clocks in at 842 pounds, and the Street Glide is going to clock in at 814. There have also been some changes to the suspension on this motorcycle and the bags to increase the cornering clearance, as well as some improvements to the brakes, which are Brembo calipers, even though they do have the Harley badging on there, because of course, it's got to be Harley badged. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we get on the road is the optional tech package for this motorcycle. They have all sorts of stuff baked into this bike that help you ride it a little bit more aggressively if you wanted to get zesty with it. They have the drag torque slip control, which is probably the biggest thing for when you're smacking down gears. The bike will automatically adjust the throttle at the rear wheel just to make sure that you don't get a little too slideways while you're out there. They also have cornering ABS, they have lean sensitive traction control, all that good stuff monitored by a 6-axis IMU. But all that tech aside, how does this motorcycle actually feel when you get it out on the road?
So you're heading out on the road, you've got yourself that new fancy Road Glide ST with all your newfangled gizmos and gadgets, and you think you don't need a phone mount anymore. Well, you'd be wrong. How else are you going to measure your new and improved lean angle, huh? Are you just going to use chicken strips like a squid, or back up your claims with some cold hard data like the chartered accountant you know you are? That's what I thought. Whether you're on a rolling battleship like the Road Glide or a little sport bike like a Hayabusa, Rockform has a phone mount and case combo to protect your phone and hold it securely to your handlebars for a long day's ride. Click that link down below and use the code YN25 to get 25% off your order. You're welcome.
Alrighty folks, now hopping on the Street Glide, getting some initial impressions down on this motorcycle, and I gotta say, it's not all bad, and it's not all good. That's my initial first reaction to this motorcycle. First of all, let's talk about some of the good stuff. The 117 actually feels pretty good in this bike. It's giving you, so it feels a lot like the Fat Bob, mostly because the Fat Bob weighs 150 pounds less, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So the added weight on this motorcycle is compensated for really well by the 117. I feel like if I was on the 114, I'd want a little bit more grunt out of this engine. I was able to wind it out when we were doing some filming earlier, really go through like 1 to 3rd to 4th gear, basically just flat out on a straight stretch of road. And it's a lot of fun from about 1 to 100. It really pulls, which is fun. You know, you really get to experience all that torque, and you get to wind it out to, it goes up to about 5,500 on here before it really starts hitting the limiter, which is nice. Personally, I feel like the limiter could be set a little bit higher. I feel like it's probably set at about 5,500, more out of mercy than anything. But, you know, take it or leave it. You still get a ton of power out of this motorcycle. I do kind of wish it was making more than that 106. The 127-ish foot-pounds, I believe, is the number. I've said it earlier. But the torque on this is great. There's a ton of roll-on power just about everywhere, which is nice because it means there's no such thing as a wrong gear. So if I go up to 5th gear here, I still have a ton of roll-on power, which is great. Next thing, it is really easy to ride this motorcycle, which, again, is something you might not have expected about this bike. You might think, oh, it's this big, heavy motorcycle. It's probably a lot to work with. And no, it's really not. Guiding it through these, you know, easy-going twisties here, it's really easy to get along with. Because of the way the power comes on, it's not so overwhelming when you snap the throttle open. It's actually a little bit forgiving. Plus you have that drag torque control, so if you get a little bit zesty with your downshifts, the bike will figure itself out for you. Keep you all in one piece, because you can definitely goof up your downshifts if you're not careful on this bike. And it basically, you know, modulates the throttle and slip to the rear wheel to make sure that you don't have a problem. Now, the biggest complaint that I have about this bike so far is my right knee, or shin, I suppose, keeps smacking into the heavy breather intake on this bike. It's cool. It's a cool looking part, but I don't know. It's really taken up a lot of space down there, and it feels like when I need to go grab the rear brake on the bike, it keeps hitting the heavy breather, which is really annoying. And yeah, I am wearing sport boots that have a little bit of shin protection, so my shin is a little bit bulkier than perhaps the average Harley rider, but still, it's awful close. And that leads to a second issue that I'm having, is it just feels a little cramped. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like, for me, to really gel with this bike, I'd like the seat to come back about an inch. I'd like it to come back an inch and up an inch. And if I remember correctly, Harley usually supplies a tall boy seat, and those usually are about an inch back and an inch up. But if I sit like on the seat hump here, I'm super duper comfortable. I have a little bit more reach to the bars. My arms are totally straight, and I can't handle the bike as well. But it feels better. It's a little bit more comfortable. I feel like I can spread out, and it helps alleviate a little bit of that issue with the heavy breather, where the angle of my leg allows me to hit the rear brake without smacking into the heavy breather. So if this were my bike, I would 100% need to swap the seat on this to just give myself a little bit more room. Alrighty guys, so we are out here on the highway on the Street Glide, and something that I didn't anticipate to be a problem is actually causing me a problem right now. And I'm not sure if y'all can hear it. I don't imagine how you can't. The wind buffeting off this windscreen is so bad that it's actually giving me a headache. I am getting it really clean right about there, and then it hits me right above the eyeballs. And I actually have to duck down quite a bit to feel like I'm in clean air. And this is not how I would want to be cruising. So if this were my motorcycle, the very first thing that I would need to do is I would need to get rid of this situation. I would need to put a bigger windscreen up there, which is a shame because I actually like this little tinted screen here. But if I sit up where I'm comfortable, I'm getting so much noise on my helmet that it's shaking my eyeballs inside my head. And that's not a problem I anticipated having on this motorcycle. You know, we're only doing 80 miles an hour. If we were going to go even faster, which I have done, it gets worse. So that's not a great sign for this motorcycle. But one problem that I've already mentioned is that the heavy breather intake here, it's not as bad as I initially thought. The heavy breather is not, I'm going to duck down so y'all can actually hear me nice and clean. The heavy breather's not in the worst place. It's not in a great spot, but I feel like if this were my motorcycle, I would definitely need to get a lower profile version of the heavy breather, which they do have. It's just, you know, it's a shame that you'd have to throw 2 mods right on the bike from the factory in this price point. That is a little bit of a bummer. But I'm going to keep riding and continue coming up with some thoughts on this here bike. Okay, so I've put down some more miles on this motorcycle, and I have been accumulating some thoughts on it. The biggest way I can describe this particular motorcycle, the Street Glide, we're going to see about getting on a road glide in a little bit, is it is a solid foundation upon which you can build your version of a Harley Sport Touring motorcycle. Now, that might sound a little bit like damning with fine praise. There are a lot of things that I need to change on this were it my motorcycle. You can hear it now. The windscreen, 100% has to change. And I'm actually ducking down to keep the wind off my helmet. Seat, need to adjust the seat. Need to adjust the heavy breather. But, that being said, I don't feel the need to run out and get a whole bunch of, you know, go fast bits to bolt to this bike. It feels plenty powerful when you roll on. I'm currently in 6th gear, which is a lot taller, so there's not a ton of roll on in 6th. But if I drop down to 5th here, you get a good little bit of punch. You still need to be a little bit quicker in 5th gear, but you know, 3rd, 4th, you're totally fine to just roll on and have immediate power, which is super nice. The fit and finish on this motorcycle, another thing, it feels great. It feels like a super premium bike. But, that being said, it is still a little bit flawed in my opinion as a guy my size. However, we are going to see if we can hop on a road glide and see if that motorcycle alleviates some of the issues that I'm having with this one. Let's check it out. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we have broken for lunch, and I am now sitting atop the Road Glide ST. I have dealt with the headache, I ate a burger, and I am considerably less cranky. But, yeah, I think that immediately hopping on the Road Glide, I am feeling a lot more comfortable on this motorcycle. Now, here's the thing. This motorcycle from the neck back is the exact same. It's got the exact same issues with the seat and the exact same issues with the heavy breather air intake there. It's still up under my knee, and I really can't stand where it's sitting. But the issue with wind blast is significantly reduced on this motorcycle. Now, I haven't quite taken it up to, you know, highway speeds just yet, but I can tell you for a fact that on the Street Glide, I'm getting way more wind in my face. And generally, with this bigger fixed fairing here, I'm sitting in a nice, comfortable pocket where I can really actually just enjoy the ride. I'm way more comfortable on this motorcycle simply because I don't have a bunch of wind in my face. Now, in terms of handling, very similar to the Street Glide. Very, very similar, obviously, because they're the same from the neck back. They handle... This one handles perhaps a little bit more ponderously because it's got a little extra weight up front with that fairing in the way. But it's not so bad that I notice. And honestly, at slow speeds, this thing feels just a little bit more confidence inspiring. You know, as I was chucking some Uis when we were doing the filming earlier, and I switched between Street Glide and Road Glide. And even just doing little, you know, quick U-turns, the Road Glide felt more comfortable. I also very much prefer the layout of this cockpit. It is way roomier on this bike, and maybe that's part of the reason why I'm sitting here feeling like I'm more comfortable on this bike. There's just, it feels like there's more room. Stuff just isn't right up in my face all the time, which is super nice. I like the gauge layout a lot better. I like that, you know, the dashboard is kind of in eye line. You know, you don't have to look down to see it. No matter where you look, you actually see the gauges. Now, I kind of would like to swap the fuel and voltage gauges for tack and speedo, just so that those are more in my eye line than down. But, whatever. That's just like a small thing. You know, I have to look, you know, what is it, 10 extra degrees more down to see it. I can still see the road ahead of me, and I don't have to tilt my head down to look. Now, there is that little opening right there. I'm not sure if y'all can see, but there's this little flap that you can adjust right there. And I'm not sure it actually does anything. I'm sure somebody with, you know, a wind tunnel can tell me that it reduces air impact to my face by, you know, 1% or something like that, but I don't know. I don't notice a significant difference cruising at 65 miles an hour with that flap up and down. It just seems like, you know, neat. That's all I can say, is it's kind of neat. But those are my initial impressions on the Road Glide. I'm going to continue to ride this motorcycle. We got about another 50 miles until we hit our fuel stop, and between then and now we'll see if I can't accumulate some more information for you guys. So we're a few more miles down the road, honestly not that far from where I shot that last clip, and I can already tell you I'm having way more fun on this motorcycle than I am on the Street Glide. The Road Glide is great. I'm really enjoying this motorcycle. I still have my quibbles with the seat and with the heavy breather, but I don't know, just generally it feels like there's less. Maybe the wind blast was just so severe on the stock Street Glide that it was hampering my experience. But going back to back on both of these, man, the Road Glide is where it's at. And another bonus of having all this extra wind protection is you can hear the heavy breather intake a lot more. You hear way more intake noise on this motorcycle. I noticed myself keeping this bike a lot higher up in the RPMs and riding it like just treating the throttle like a light switch. All right, this is actually perfect to show you. We got a little bit of a straight. Can't go too fast, but hopefully you guys can really hear that intake on this motorcycle like I can. It really honks in air, and that is super cool. It feels faster when you ride it because it's making more noise. It's just a more thrilling motorcycle, in my opinion. I can't believe that adding this massive batwing fairing has solved all my problems, or at least all of the big problems, but it sure seems to have. So here's something that I'm noticing that might perhaps be a negative. We're currently sitting in this wind-whipped valley. I'm not sure if you can see, But over there is a massive dust devil, and we're riding into what looks like a sizable dust storm, honestly, from all the breeze coming in off those mountains to my left. But there's a huge cross breeze left to right, and I'm noticing that this motorcycle seems to react a lot more to the breeze. It is possible that I just didn't have the Street Glide in, you know, as perfect wind whip situations as this. But I don't know, I feel like this is, I find the bike having to correct for the breeze and riding kind of, instead of straight up and down, a little bit like this more often. I tell you what, though, that's not a big enough negative for me to want to hop back on the Street Glide. All right, let's have a little bit of fun pulling away from this stop sign, shall we? Yeah, that's just more fun on this motorcycle. I don't know what to tell you. It is more fun revving this thing out than it is revving the Street Glide out. I really do think it's down to the added wind protection, allowing me to hear the heavy breather more. You know, it's gonna sound stupid, but it's true. There's a lot to riding one of these Harleys that comes down to the feel of riding this motorcycle and the experience of riding it. And if you're allowed to engage more with the experience, you're allowed to like feel and hear more of what the motorcycle's doing, it's just a more thrilling experience. And I think that's really why I'm resonating more with the Road Glide here. Why I'm able to forgive smacking my damn shin into this heavy breather. I mean, I'm willing to look past more of the faults because I'm having fun on this bike. But I honestly do think that because I have more wind protection, because I don't feel so cramped on this bike, you know, with all of this dashboard stuff being farther away, it just feels like a more comfortable ride. I know it's crazy because, again, from the neck back, they're the same bike. I'm sitting in the same seat. I'm sitting with the pegs or the boards are in the same spot. But man, I'm enjoying this a lot more. Don't know what to tell you guys. All right, one more thing I am noticing about this motorcycle. Its suspension is a bit stiff. It doesn't seem like it's just soaking up the bumps in the road like you'd expect a bike like this to do. I feel like I'm feeling a lot more of the road underneath me as I have to dodge yet another tumbleweed. There's a ton of tumbleweeds blowing across the road right now. I actually got hit by one, a big one, like probably the size of this motorcycle almost. But anyway, I feel like I'm getting a lot of feedback from the road on this, perhaps too much. Like, the suspension could stand to be just a smidgen softer. I know this is the ST model, so it's meant to be, you know, more tight and more focused for better performance on a twisty. But I feel like for that, then they would benefit from what that guy's riding up there, which is the P&A model, which has the Öhlins the Öhlins shocks in the rear, so that they're become fully adjustable, and you can perhaps dial out some of the, you know, just aggressive bumps if you want to, and then if you want to get sporty with it, you know, tighten up your suspension a little bit. Because right now all I've got is preload on this motorcycle here. But honestly, I mean, I gotta say, I'm starting to grasp at straws to find real faults with this one that I haven't already mentioned with the Street Glide. So I think with all of that being said, I'm going to spend some more time on both of these motorcycles for science, I'm going to swap back over to the Street Glide and see if perhaps I can't come to some final thoughts on both of these bikes.
Now, bringing it back in here, I wanted to wrap up some of my thoughts on these two motorcycles. And it was a little bit more divisive than I originally thought, because again, these motorcycles from the neck back, they are exactly the same. Same engine, same seat, same bags, same big intake that's right on your right knee. But for some reason, when I sat on the Road Glide, all of my issues with these bikes just disappeared. I still wish I had a thicker seat underneath my butt, because towards the end of the day, the seat really started to feel paper thin, and I found myself pushing my weight back up on the ass shelf so that I would have a little bit more cushion when I was going over some bumps. However, on the Street Glide here, it was just a little bit, I felt like the problems were compounded by the fact that I had not enough wind protection. I was getting a bunch of buffeting on this motorcycle that felt like somebody was playing the bongos on my helmet while I was out riding, and that was a big bummer for me. On the Road Glide, however, that problem just sort of disappeared. Now, obviously you can get a taller shield for this to make that problem go away, but it still feels compact with the entire dashboard pushed right up in your face. It just felt like a smaller motorcycle. And again, I liked the fact that with the added wind protection of this massive fixed fairing, you could really hear the intake working on this bike. It just made it more visceral, and I found myself having more fun revving this bike out than I was on the Street Glide. However, there are a bunch of people down in the comments right now who are telling me that the Street Glide is the superior motorcycle because it is two camps, Road Glide and Street Glide. I just happen to find myself living in Road Glide land. And if it were my money, I would be going out and getting a Road Glide ST. One thing I did notice about this motorcycle, chucking it down some tight, twisty canyons on our way up to the National Monument that we were checking out, is that it handled about as well as that Goldwing that we rode a little while back. And that actually blows my mind, because the Goldwing handled really, really well. But all of that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the Road Glide ST and the Street Glide ST. If you've got any questions, go ahead and drop them down below. But until the next episode of Yammy Noob, I will catch you guys later.
And that's where this video was supposed to end, but then I watched it back and realized that towards the end, it turned into Road Glide versus Street Glide and not enough conversation about the ST bikes. So if you'll allow me a bit of an epilogue, let's discuss the ST incarnations of these motorcycles and see if they're the upgrade that Harley touts them to be. Also, just so you know, this is 8 days after I filmed all of the stuff for this episode. I'm standing in my closet in Austin as opposed to Arizona, and I've had a little bit of time to let this stuff percolate on me. Just developed my thoughts a little bit more. All right, getting back on script. Should you run out and buy one of these motorcycles if you already have a non-ST version? Nah, probably not. I don't think you're going to see enough improvement over the base model. Sure, the engine is making 6.7% more torque thanks to the extra 3 cubes, but your mods probably already have made up for that. Let's also talk about the performance bagger aspirations here. I see what Harley's trying to do by drawing a line between the race bike and the bike that's on the showroom floors, but having spoken to the riders and the engineers and seen them both in person, there's very little beyond the frame that's the same between these motorcycles. The suspension isn't the same, even though you can buy drop-in Öhlins. The engine isn't the same, even though you can buy a 131 kit for your bike. And let's face it, the race bike is no longer about Grand American Touring like the Road Glide page says on HD's website. Could you make a Road Glide into a race bike? Sure. And the guys I spoke to admitted that the closest some folks might get to a race bike is putting hot cams in their bike and calling it a performance bagger, and that's totally fine. But neither of these motorcycles felt to me like the offspring of the race bike. Rather, the race bike seems like the rebellious child of the ST models, which is ironic when Harley's own material claims that the performance baggers come from a generational shift in the riders of their baggers. Now, this is the part where I have to be brutally honest. I had fun on these bikes, and their capabilities mid-corner surprised me. They felt just as stable mid-corner as the Goldwing, and more stable than bikes like the Fat Bob and the Dyna that we rode a while back. But they said ST stands for Sport Touring, and with the understanding that these bikes are more touring biased than sport, let's see if they command their $30,000 asking price. Non-adjustable windscreen, an uncomfortable seat, no heated grips, and the safety package is an optional added cost. Man, that is tough no matter which way you slice it. I know that the vast majority of street glide riders will replace their front windscreen, and I replaced the seats on both of my Harleys, but for $30,000, I don't want to have to do either of those things. I also can't say that the miles melted away while I was on the street glide. The road glide was better, but again, we come back to the seat issue. If you're in the market for a new road glide or a street glide, the ST model is the one to get. But it's not perfect out of the box. I also think that they're backing the wrong horse. The Lowrider ST is lighter with the same 117 power plant. I imagine that bike will go like stink, and it's got a lot of the bagger aesthetic now. I applaud Harley for going racing and trying fun stuff like this because racing breeds innovation, and I do believe them when they say that race testing their parts will allow them to create a better product for the consumer. But maybe that massive update will come in a few years, or maybe it already has with the Lowrider ST. Either way, I'm still excited to see what Harley has up their sleeve for the rest of this year, and you know I'll be covering it, so stay tuned, y'all.